Hi everyone, this is Sheila with Successful Women Talk. I want to say thank you for joining me today. Today we have very special guest, Linda Rubright. Now Linda is the she is the co-founder of the Dolly SEO company. She is an SEO guru. I learned about her from another podcast that I listened to, and after listening to her on that podcast and the simplistic way that she explained SEO, I knew that I needed to have her on the show. So today she and I discuss SEO. We try and talk about it from a basic level. She gives us 5 steps that you can take in order to optimize each post, which she says, unless you are an SEO guru, that is just the best place to start. So we talk about that, what's good content versus bad content, and just some tips and tricks for SEO optimization. So stay tuned for the interview with Linda, and also jump over to www.successfulwomentalk.com, sign up for our email list, and join the community. And thanks again. Listen up to the interview, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks. Hi everyone, this is Sheila Butler with Successful Women Talk, and I'm excited today. We have a very special guest, Linda Rubright. Now, Linda is the founder of The Delicious Day, and she's the co-owner of the Dolly SEO company. She's like an SEO guru, makes it sound so simple, so we are most excited to have her on the show. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Again, I found you, I think through an interview you did on Blogcast FM. And you made SEO sound so simple that I was like, we have to have you on the show. Because to most of us, it's not. But you really did break it down into steps that made it sound simple. So I can't wait to jump into your story.
Thank you.
Well, let's first start by, I usually ask everyone, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got started in business.
Of course. Well, I actually studied biology, but quickly learned, as my parents had told me for years and years, that there's not much of a job in that industry. But it took me, going through it to learn that myself. And I just back then it was mid '90s, and I got into a software development company, and that quickly evolved into doing project management for interactive companies, which quickly evolved into user experience and copywriting and content strategy, and then of course SEO, and that was across a broad range. It was for the interactive agencies, it was for small businesses, it was for large corporations. It was kind of for the whole gamut. So the good thing is I've had the whole breadth of experience. I know the pains of small businesses. I know the pains of working in big businesses. I've kind of done it all, which is actually really important, I think, in SEO, because I think with SEO people look at it just as one thing, and I think typically what they look at it as is just keywords. And then I think lately probably more recently, or over the last few years, there's a lot of confusion with how does social media fit into that, and how does link building and link baiting and that sort of thing all fit into it. So I think in order to do it well, you have to understand the whole concept of what a website could and can do. And that's kind of what the last 15 or so years has really given me, is that experience.
Well, I love that. And like you said, a lot of different terms, and it does become confusing for someone like myself. I told you before we started recording that I had an offline business for 7 or 8 years, and we had a website that was just kind of like a static brochure. And then when I started learning about the online business in the online world, it truly is an entire new world. And it is a bit scary. So how do you deal with customers or clients like myself that are really new, don't know a lot about SEO? How do you kind of get them moving in the right direction?
Well, I do one of two things. I either do it for them.
That's usually easiest.
Or I teach them. And essentially I look at, what I try to kind of figure out pretty quickly is their degree of technical knowledge. Sometimes when you have people that have their own website, perhaps a WordPress website where they've dealt with plugins, that sort of thing, then I think they might be more geared towards start looking at some of the SEO tools that help you select, those keywords that everyone's talking about. Then there's, the other people that are you can always tell them because they just kind of say like link baiting and what do I do about social media and Twitter, and they're just so confused, and I feel horrible for them because it is really actually not that complicated, and I just think there's so much out there that it makes it complicated. So this is what I do with them. We say no tools at all. And so what we do is I say, okay, what what are you writing about? Like, let's just think what we're writing about. Because essentially what we do with search engine optimization is we try to explain to search engines and search engine terminology what this particular post and website is about. So instead of, trying to have people conquer, optimizing entire site, we say, okay, let's just optimize this post. So let's say they were doing a post on, their favorite apple pie recipe. So we'd say, okay, like, what is this about? And generally, what kind of terms or phrases would people be looking for in regards to, my apple pie recipe? Well, I think, look at someone like me, like maybe best apple pie recipe. I think that is probably people kind of understand search engines and they understand like, apple pie recipe, best apple pie, do I want the apple pie recipe? No, I want the best apple pie recipe. So, okay, best apple pie recipe. And then, one other keyword phrase, let's say how to make apple pie. So these are two things I think they're very, maybe they're not the exact search terms that these tools would recommend to you, but they are, I think, very solid terminology or phrases regarding to your post. Now, what you should not do is you should not say, but I want to rank for apples, or I want to rank for pie, or I want to rank for recipes, because then essentially what you're doing is when you put in, instead of selecting the keyword phrase best apple pie recipe, and you select recipe, essentially what you're doing is then you're competing with every single other website in the world that speaks English that's also trying to compete for recipes. So that's putting you at a pretty significant disadvantage. However, if you optimize around best apple pie recipe, then you're significantly reducing your field of competition. Not to say that field is small now, but at least it's a lot smaller. Does that all make sense so far?
That does make sense, yes.
Okay, perfect. So we have these two keyword phrases that we've picked. Best apple pie recipe and how to make apple pie. And now the thing is you have to incorporate these into certain elements of the website. And I've come up with this acronym, and I wish the only thing it sounds like is SIT. which stands for U for URL, H for headline, C for content, I for image, and T for title. So you go through that. So you have these two keyword phrases. You start with the URL. Now, you have thedeliciousday.com, and we're going to put in my best apple pie recipe. Now, what you want to do with the URL is you want to say, okay, out of these keyword phrases, which one do I think most people search for? Which one do I think is most what my post is about? Well, it's about, it's a recipe. So I think the phrase that best describes this is best apple pie recipe. So then you would select the URL, deliciousday.com / best apple pie recipe .html. And the reason that you put the dashes in is because you need to tell the search engine that those are individual words. Otherwise, if you just do best apple pie recipe, the search engines are smarter. They're not going to look at it and think best apple pie recipe is one word, or they could. But it's better to differentiate like that. So crystal clear to the search engines.
Now,
then you go to the...
I'm sorry. If you're using WordPress, it will automatically put those dashes in there for you. Is that correct?
It automatically puts in the default URL that it just sets for you. It will put in the dashes, but I do not believe it puts in the dashes if you just type it in. I believe if you just typed in one big word, best apple pie recipe, it would just be one.
Okay.
So you just have to add in the dashes.
Okay.
So now we go to the headline, which is, what we all are very familiar with as far as, the headlines of a, New York Times article or the Denver Post or that sort of thing. And, and it's hard here because you have these keyword phrases. Sometimes you want something cuter than, your keywords. But, perhaps, if we're just thinking about SEO here, you could just say like, see the best apple pie recipe, or know how to make apple pie, like see the best apple pie recipe. Now that, as a writer, that's a tough one, right? Because there's more in the world than SEO, and, the title is really important to get people to read it. So it's tricky, but it's something to keep in mind both when you're writing the title and when you're, selecting the keywords. A lot of times, for example, I've worked with lawyers in the past, and you'll see, some of the keywords that people pick are, divorce lawyer, Denver CO kind of thing. And when you actually go to try to incorporate divorce lawyer, Denver CO in the copy, it doesn't really look right, So it's kind of this balance of what are the best keywords and what's going to sound right and what's going to flow right. So anyways, I mean, as far as the headline goes, it's, keep that in mind definitely when you are writing the content or when you're writing the headline. The next thing, C, that's content. And essentially what you want to do is you want to take these two keyword phrases, 2 to 3 keyword phrases. We just picked 2 for this example because I don't think I could remember all 3 in my head. We're talking about it. Hold on. So, and then the content, what you want is you want 2 to 5% of the content to be to include the keyword phrases. So if you have 200 to 250 words in your post, which you should, which is recommended, then that means, 2 to 5%. That means, so if it's 200 words, 10, so about 5 to 12 of the keywords so 5 to 12 of the words in the post should be, how to make apple pie or best apple pie recipe. Now, the important thing is how to make apple pie is five words. It's not 1, it's 5. So when you're trying to get 5 to 10, if you just have that in once, you're like halfway there. You're halfway done.
So you're saying somewhere maybe twice within, so if that's your keyword, it's 5. Mm-hmm. So twice within your article, you need to mention those 5 words.
Exactly. Okay. So not, right? Not hard at all. And then I is image. And so a lot of times what happens is the images that get saved on, that get uploaded to a website are, just DSC 1984 or something. What we want to do is this is another opportunity to include our keywords. So of course, when we see these recipes, we very often see the end product, So in that you could name, instead of naming it DSC 1984, you could name it, best dash, again, the dashes, best dash apple dash pie dash recipe.jpg. So, it's another place to put it in. And then you also have the alt image tag, which we're all familiar with when you roll over an image. Like, for example, when you roll over the Mozilla icon on your desktop, it always says access the internet. That's another place where you can add in your keywords. Now, in this, you have to remember someone's actually reading this, so it's better to make it look more like a sentence. More of learn how to make apple pie with my. Of course, this is where the, it doesn't quite work and go in with my apple pie recipe, that kind of thing. And I'm always a really big advocate for the alt image tags. 1, because it's obviously good for SEO, but 2, for people who have vision issues or are blind, they have the readers read the website and the reader will read DSC 1984 to them. So it doesn't really give them an idea of what the picture is. It's not really helping them understand what your post is about. Whereas if you say, picture of my, favorite apple pie, or a picture of the end product of how to make apple pie, you're 1, appeasing the search engine, and 2, you're actually helping that audience out as well.
Gotcha.
And then the very last thing is the title, which I think people get the most confused with, the idea of the headline that we talked about, which everyone's familiar with, and the title. The title is considered the most important element of SEO. And essentially what title is when you type in, apple pie recipes in Google, it's what shows up on the link. It's what you click on. It also shows up in the very upper leftmost part of your website. And so it's important that your keywords are in that. So if someone's searching for how to make apple pie, they'll actually see in your link that it says how to make apple pie. So they'll know that, there's a very good chance that what they're looking for is on your website. So again, you want to arrange that. So we would want the title tag to be, best apple pie recipe. And I usually do pipes. Sometimes people do commas, how to make apple pie. Now that's supposed to be about 60-ish characters. Depending on who you talk to, you'll get a little bit of a different answer. I always try to be more conservative, just in case. So I'm not sure how many, best apple pie recipe and how to make apple pie, how many characters that turns out to be. But if you have a short website name, if it was, my website, you can also add that at the end. So it gives you the branding opportunity there as well. A lot of times what people do is they make the mistake of putting their website name in the front. So, the delicious day, and then my best apple pie recipe. The problem for that is when you type in the delicious day, I come up on the first page. So I'm not trying to rank for the delicious day. I'm trying to rank for, my apple pie recipe. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that all the important keywords are in the front. And then, if there's any space left over for the branding opportunities, definitely consider putting, either the product name or your website name or whatever would make sense. And that, if you just start doing that, You are well on your way. And what I find with people is they start to do that. They start to get the confidence. They start to see people coming to their site. They start looking at their Google Analytics. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, I can tackle. Like now I'm interested. Like now it's working. Now it's not such a mystery anymore.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is where it gets a little bit confusing as well. So let's say we're going to go with the apple pie analogy here, but let's say, okay, you write an article. Let's say you have a blog and you're writing an article. You just wrote the article that we just talked about. So, and your main keywords are best apple pie. I forget exactly what we said, but how do you continue to write content around the exact same thing? So that becomes difficult as well. How do you include that? I mean, you can only do so many articles on an apple pie recipe, to me, or, how do you continue to write, 3 days of posts around that if those are your two main keywords? How do you keep up? What do you do?
Well, see, that's an interesting thing. So the question then that becomes a bigger question of what is your website trying to rank for? So if your website was just apple pie recipes, then you would start to think, okay, maybe. God, I don't like Thanksgiving apple pie. I don't know if there's any difference. I can't cook to save my life. But anyways, then you'd be like, okay, I'm going to write about our Thanksgiving apple pie. And then you would write a post about that, but then you'd optimize more around Thanksgiving apple pie recipe. So then after you do, and then Christmas apple pie and those sort of things, then what happens is essentially you start building this word collage to search engines, because you have Thanksgiving apple pie and best apple pie and Christmas apple pie. And you start in the search engine start saying, wow, like they write a lot about apple pie recipes, maybe, people seem to like it. People seem to share it. Maybe we'll start like ranking, pushing them up more. Now, the thing is, it's really important is that every time you write your apple pie recipe, you select unique keywords. And it should be a unique post too. I mean, we can't forget that the end people, we are actually writing this for people and not for search engines. So we do want it to be good content. But what happens is if you optimize every post around best apple pie recipe, then you start competing with yourself. So then you have, 4 posts around best apple pie recipe and the search engines come and are like, what do I do? I don't know which one to rank. But if someone types in, oh, I want an apple pie for Thanksgiving, well, then they do know which one. And then, if it's best apple pie recipe and, 20,000 people look at it a day, then they're going to be like, oh, I bet, this is the best apple pie recipe and it's going to rank that way. Does that answer your question?
I think that helps. I'm kind of thinking of, let's say someone has a children's furniture line. And so they sell furniture, they sell wall art, they sell lighting, but all in the children's world. So I guess their website their keywords for the website is going to kind of be one thing, but what they write posts about are not, they're going to be a little bit different. So you're just trying to create a lot of keywords around all of those features, I guess, to start ranking for that. Is that correct?
Well, my guess would be that the main keyword that you'd want to rank for is children's furniture or something like that. Perhaps it's more specific. Maybe it's like children's bedroom furniture, that kind of thing. But essentially, I mean, it does come to the point where, for example, I've worked with people who have, luxury properties throughout Europe. There's only so many ways after a while that you can say luxury properties.
Exactly.
But it does not negate the need to keep writing about luxury properties. Now, of course, what you can do is so you can write about luxury properties, then you can write about the area, then you can write about, what to do in the area, specific activities in the area. It kind of gets a little vague after a while, but it's kind of like you start on the inside and you write everything you can about these properties, and then you go a little bit, outside. Maybe you're writing about children's furniture and you're like, I've written everything there is to write about children's furniture. Well, then maybe now you write about children's bedroom design, that kind of thing. So it's all along kind of this similar topic. Probably what you wouldn't want to do is, write about like, oh, my vacation with my children. Because that's something totally different. We want to make sure that everything's in the same theme so that search engines understand like, okay, this is about children, this is about children's design, this is about children's furniture. It's attracting crowds and people who are interested in this kind of content, who's interested in sharing it. Is that getting closer to answering your question? Helps.
Because I think what I find is in the furniture and decor world, which is kind of where I spend a lot of my time, I find it interior designers and retailers, they're slow to develop and they're slow to go online. They're slow to blog because they don't understand the whole concept of it. And then you throw in the SEO part, then it really gets scary. So, just thinking about how to narrow that down to them. And, you hear the terms, you've got good content and bad content. So, somehow just to make it to where they can start to get out there, get a blog, put some posts that can be helpful. So just thinking along those terms is what I was trying to kind of get to.
Right. I mean, I think as far as actual posts to write, I always give people ideas like FAQs are fantastic. Interviews with other people are fantastic because what happens, right? Like you interview them, they're excited, they share it. So, now not only do you have the post written, you understand SEO, now you've, accomplished the other mystery, right? How do you get people to share and get things on Facebook? What else do we do? FAQs, interviews, of course, I'm blanking on it right now. But, top 10 lists, like what top 10 things to do, top 10 things not to do, those kind of things. One, they're great for internet because that's how people love to read. I mean, I think we've all read,
Sure.
best top 10 beaches, top 10 cities to live in, that sort of thing. So those kind of things are great for people who are a little bit overwhelmed with where to start because some people aren't, strong writers, that sort of thing. So
great.
Bullet points are good.
What is your opinion on video?
Video. My opinion on video is great content is great content. I think, and I mean, obviously, there's a reason the YouTube's the number 2 website in the world. I think people respond very well to it. But I don't think video in and of itself, just because it's a video, I don't think it draws people to it necessarily. I think perhaps, if you're doing a how-to, like, perhaps the how-to apple pie thing, perhaps a video people would respond to better than text. So in that kind of situation, I think video is good, but in the end, it has to be good. And then video is a little bit more complicated with SEO because obviously search engines can't hear and listen to it, but there are a lot of things. I see in your post where you explain how you talk, what you talked about and the main points and this sort of thing, which is fantastic for SEO. So you have both a video, which many people respond to and then you also have the text, which search engines like, and I think people before they're going to invest the time in watching a video kind of want to know what it's all about. So.
Gotcha. What I love is, which is why I really want to have you on. You do make it sound so easy, and it probably is, and then again it isn't. And what I mean isn't is that we all get busy. So companies like yourself, not only can you teach, but then you can also do those things for us. But you have some courses on your company. Let's talk about that a little bit because even people like me, I want to know the basics of SEO, but I also need a little bit of help. So let's talk about how you guys, what services you offer and your courses that you offer as well.
Well, essentially, do it 3 different ways. One, which I find actually most people respond to, is just one-on-one. I think most people get so overwhelmed by it, or they'll hear somebody else's example and they're like, "Oh, that doesn't really apply to me," or and then there's group online, classes in the webinar format, and then kind of the third option, which sometimes we start with the first option, and people are like, "Oh, will you just do it?" and that's just full service where we would just go in and, obviously have a conversation with you about the kind of terms that you're trying to rank for. And then from that conversation, go do a fairly extensive research into, okay, these are the terms you want to rank for. What's the reality of that? What's the competition doing? That sort of thing. Select unique keywords for each page, go over that with you, and then go through and integrate all of those elements into the page as we talked about. And the other thing that we didn't talk about is reporting. And that's a really critical point, but I usually don't talk about that with people because again, it's like tools and numbers and things, but it's really important and people get excited actually after a while, I think when they start seeing things go, but it's really important to see which keywords are and are not driving traffic to your site, what, where your traffic is and is not coming from, because that helps you in writing posts, to your question about writing posts, knowing, what works, what doesn't, that sort of thing.
So a lot of people now are saying, okay, you've got to be on the social media bandwagon. You have to have a lot of followers. You've got to spend a lot of time in these social media platforms. What is your opinion from an SEO perspective? If you had to choose good content or spending a lot of time gaining followers, where would you go with that?
Good content.
Good
Always
content.
good content. Always good content. I mean, I do believe it might take different. I mean, if you have 100,000 Facebook followers, you're obviously, and you post one post, you're obviously going to get, if you have 100,000 Facebook followers and you post one kind of so-so crappy post, or if you have 100 followers and you post a phenomenal one, I'd go with option B because eventually with time, it will change. But some people are like, but I don't want to wait, and I don't have time, which is a very real situation for many people.
And speaking of time, when someone starts a kind of a new website or a new blog, how long does it take to really kind of start gaining some traction? I mean, is there a number? Is it just dependent upon different factors?
Gosh, that is such a great question. I'm assuming you're just talking about in general, not just with SEO, right?
Yeah, just kind of like just general. If someone started just something new, how long is it?
Gosh, that is so.
It's
You
tough.
know what? With the people I've seen stick to it, the people that I see, and there's kind of two kinds of people. There's kind of people that throw the content up there and are like, oh, but it's content. Why don't people read it? And then there's people that kind of sink their heart into it, and it's really important to them, and it's important that it's good, and they're diligent about it, and they're very meticulous about it. And I mean, I've seen big results in like 6 months or a year. Now, big results could be you went from 10
Sure.
visitors a day to 200.
Sure.
But when you think about that mathematically, that's a pretty big
It's a big
difference.
jump.
And if next year you go from 200 to whatever that would be, I mean that's pretty good. But yeah, I would say 6 months to a year is
Being consistent.
being consistent. Being
Yeah.
consistent, yeah.
Now, here's the trick question. What is the difference between good content and bad content? What is good content?
God, that is in college I took a philosophy class and they said that's a vague predicate, which means that means something else, something to every person. Idea of good and bad.
From
Um,
maybe looking at it from more of a from your point of view, if you were working with someone and you had to tell them, okay, I would consider this list good content, I would consider don't even post this. So how would you go with that kind of framing?
the first way I look at it is I'm like, would you read it? Like that's always I'm like, do you find it interesting? Do you find that title do you find like what I did this summer interesting? Like, do you care what Sally did this summer? Um, but I think that's the first thing, and then the other thing I always think of as another acronym is ELI, like entertainment, laugh, and information.
Right.
I really think that is what people go to the internet for: is to be entertained, to laugh, and to be informed. And so the question is, are you doing any of those three? And then how are you doing them? And again, as you were saying, like offline and online are two very different things, and how you inform people online is very different than how you do it offline. And I think, with your videos, that's a very, very good way to inform people. I think how you format text when you do it, step by step instead of, sometimes I go to these things and it's like, this is how to do it. A lot of technical things. And it's like just 10 paragraphs of text. I'm like, oh, no way. I'm like, I want screenshots and I want bulleted points and lots of detail. So yeah, I would say it's those things. Would you read it? Entertainment, laughter, inform, and then the structure is almost as important as the content. So
I love that. And I like that you shared that with us because I think it's important to say, like, we'll just use furniture companies again. Sometimes their blogs or our business websites are so boring. And no one's reading that. And no one really wants to. I mean, I know maybe you're introducing a new product, but somehow you're going to have to make that somewhat entertaining to get people to listen and read it. I think that's what
exactly,
we need to think about from time to time.
exactly.
So I have found this fascinating, and I personally am going to go and use your services. I told you before we started, I really am going to sign up for one of your tutorials. I love to learn, and I think it's important for me, even if I'm not the person that does it, I want to understand how it's done so that when they're explaining something to me, it makes it a little bit easier. And I think a lot of people are that way. So
Yes.
if someone wanted to connect with you, where would you want to send them? What site?
Probably the easiest way, thedeliciousday.com. There's some information there. That's just my personal website, but it's also gives some high level information about SEO. So not to overwhelm you, just high level information on that, and then it has my contact information as well.
Perfect. Linda, this has been wonderful. I appreciate you taking the time and making it a little bit more simple for those of us that are not SEO gurus like you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's our show, and thanks again for tuning in. Hey, I have a huge favor. I'd like for you to join us over at www.successfulwomentalk.com. Join our email list, and on that list, you'll be a VIP. You'll be receiving all of our newest updates, newest interviews, our newsletter, and any tips and tricks we have for organizing your business and getting raving fans and customers that actually just sing your praises. So again, thanks again for tuning in. Check us out next week for another episode of SuccessfulWomenTalk.com. Thanks, guys.